It's 3 in the afternoon. The motorway is quiet. The driver is in good health and sober. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, she falls asleep. She's about to become just another road accident statistic. Last year, nearly 4,000 people were killed on British roads. Government campaigns suggest that alcohol is the major cause of these deaths. But tonight, World in Action produces startling new evidence that even more people are dying on our roads because of the side effects of common prescription drugs recommended by their doctors. Thousands of others, too, are suffering serious accidents at home and at work, simply because they're doing what their doctor ordered. A typically busy day for Oldham's paramedics. Many of their calls are to accidents in the home.
What we're going to do is we're going to strap that up so you can't move it, and when we move it out it'll be minimum movement. All right.
Yeah.
We have a very high population of old people and elderly folks, residents in the Oldham area, so it is quite a high proportion of our workload. Elderly people falling with breaks and head injuries.
Falls account for half the deaths in the over 65s. The paramedics are baffled by the nature of many of these accidents. They suspect sedative medicines may be causing many of the falls.
We're probably not as fully aware of the situation as we should be, as we're not trained in that area. But we do occasionally get jobs where people have had falls at strange hours of the night, and we're wondering, what is this lady doing up at this time of night? And it could be a drug-related problem that we're not fully aware of.
The 1960s and 70s saw a breakthrough in the treatment of insomnia, anxiety and depression. A whole series of powerful new drugs transformed people's lives. Overnight, they became household names.
Mogadon, far safer, far better.
I like Lentazole because it suits my patients.
So small, yet so effective. Ativan. Prothiodin quickly breaks the web of depressive illness.
Once a day Tranxine, the most unforgettable treatment for anxiety.
It's 4 in the afternoon. 82-year-old Dora Broadbent has had a bad fall at home. The paramedics have brought her to the Royal Oldham Hospital. The doctors discover Mrs. Broadbent is taking nitrazepam, a sleeping pill, more commonly known as Mogadon.
There are certain side effects with nitrazepam, or benzodiazepines, especially in the elderly. We do discourage the use of it because it can lead to unsteadiness and cause falls such as this.
Above a certain dose, the drugs will cause a slight drop in blood pressure when people rise from a sitting position to a standing position. And that's sufficient to make some people very dizzy and to make them fall over. That often leads to fractures, especially fractures of the hip. And that's especially dangerous and can actually lead to fatalities in older people.
White one and two orange ones.
Yeah, just milk. Yeah, and painkillers you take as well.
The next morning, Mrs. Broadbent is visited by consultant Pramod Luthra. He's increasingly concerned about the effects of sedative medicines on his patients.
We've had 5 patients in the last 5 days who have come in having had a fall or bumped into things, who've been on prescription medication.
This month, Mr. Luthra launched a pioneering study to find out how many accidents are due to prescribed drugs. So far, he's found that 1 in 10 of all patients had taken either sleeping tablets, antidepressants or tranquilizers. Millions of prescriptions are issued for these drugs every year. In Britain, in 1993, doctors wrote 13 million for depression and more than 21 million for anxiety and sleeping problems. Altogether, 77 million prescriptions were written last year for drugs affecting the central nervous system.
quite a few occasions I went to take a baking tray out of the oven, and I did so without gloves on, so burnt my hands and dropped the contents in the process and ruined the dinner. And I had quite a few accidents. I fell from the steps of a ladder and injured my collarbone and knee. I fell down an embankment and really hurt my spine.
Josephine Hollis was prescribed Librium, Valium and Temazepam by her doctor for insomnia and stress. They affected every area of her life.
I was driving along and I suddenly realised that I wasn't looking at the road. I was rummaging in my handbag, and I wasn't aware of the route I'd just taken, and I couldn't operate the pedals, couldn't operate the gears, and my faculties just were haywire. So I realised there was a danger.
With no energy, they can't think straight, their memory becomes faulty, and quite often these sedative effects will actually cause the patient to go to sleep during the day. Now, of course, we're all well aware of the consequences of that, particularly if you're driving a car or operating some complex industrial machinery.
At a peak, I was taking over 100 milligrams of Valium, and the pharmaceutical equivalent to that is about 1.5 bottles of spirits or bottles of whiskey per day.
Dr. Reg Peart was one of Britain's senior nuclear physicists and worked for IBM and Plessey. He was prescribed tranquilisers by his doctor after suffering from recurrent migraines. The drugs had a devastating effect, and his career ended in disaster.
I found it extremely difficult to concentrate, and as a result of that I got the sequence of operations in starting up the accelerators completely wrong, and as a result of that the beam line in the accelerator completely lost its high vacuum and was totally contaminated, and so the accelerators had to be shut down and stripped down and decontaminated. On many occasions I had problems driving, erratic driving. I was stopped by the police on several occasions. But my nearest disaster was once I was driving the wrong way around a roundabout over a motorway, and I came within inches of driving over the bridge onto the motorway.
Dr. Peart feels he's paid a heavy price for doing what the doctor ordered.
I mean, in my case, apart from losing a career, I lost a marriage, a home, my family, and essentially all of my assets.
This is Britain's only independent pharmaceutical research unit based at the University of Surrey. The team, led by Professor Ian Hindmarch, are the acknowledged experts in their field.
Okay, Claire, I'm going to take a blood sample from you.
Most of Britain's popular psychiatric medicines are tested here for their sedative effects. The findings are published worldwide. Sleeping tablets, antidepressants and tranquilisers are given to volunteers. They are then put through a series of difficult tests.
A lot of these involve speed of reaction. You know, we want people to see how fast they can do something. Now, this is a feature of many things in everyday living, like putting your foot on a brake in a car, getting your hand out of the way of a slamming door. Speed is vital, and if you don't respond quickly, you have an accident.
Much of the work here looks at the effects of drugs on driving performance. They want to find out how impaired people are after taking ordinary medicines. In this test, volunteers are given either a dummy pill, known as a placebo, 2 new-style antidepressants, known as SSRIs and Remas, 80 milligrams of alcohol, the legal limit, or 2 of the older and more popular antidepressants, dethiopin and amitriptyline. They were then asked to drive and brake at 70 miles per hour.
If your reaction time slows by about 100 or 120 milliseconds, that's going to add around about 10 feet to your stopping distance if you're travelling in a car at 70 miles an hour. What you find is that with the modern antidepressants, we find there's very little difference from placebo in terms of stopping distance, maybe an extra 2 foot or so. What's interesting, however, is we look where alcohol at the legal limit lies, where at 80 milligram %, you're adding between 6 and 8 feet to your distance. If we look what's happening with the older tricyclic antidepressants, we're adding an extra 10 feet or so. What you'll find in that case is that with some of these older tricyclic antidepressants, you have a longer stopping distance than the present legal limit for alcohol.
So as far as we're concerned, it's game, set and match. We have followed a long jigsaw of objective research, and the total picture shows quite clearly, as one would expect, that drugs that produce sleepiness have a higher incidence of accidents associated with them than drugs that don't.
Even the small doses of the traditional antidepressants that some of the GPs use has the same effect on car driving, for example stopping distance, as the legal limit of blood alcohol. And if you look at the type of doses we give to some patients, 3 times that dose, it's the equivalent of having 6 shorts and then jumping in a car and thinking you're okay to drive.
It is a matter of life and death. You're worse under these drugs than you would be at the present legal limit of alcohol.
So they could kill you?
They could kill you.
You don't see the red lights. With the drugs, lights don't relate. All lights become a blur. So you don't even see the colour of stop-go. You don't see it. I know loads of times I've just gone straight through. Loads of times I've done that.
After collapsing with nervous exhaustion, Mike Jones was prescribed antidepressants and tranquilizers. He took them for 12 years. He too had numerous accidents at home, but his worst experiences came when driving.
Before I got in the car, I would take 5 or 10 milligrams of Valium again, or if I was on, or whatever I was on, whether it be antidepressants, I would take them. And you get in the car and you start to feel closed in because of the effects it had on you. And then you'd drive off and you would wonder where the heck you were going. You have tunnel vision. You don't see anything from the side, left or right. You just see ahead. You've got no perception of speed. You've got no perception of sound. And because you're so locked in, your reactions are so crazy, you just don't operate as a person. So how on earth can you drive a car?
Started from Librium, Ativan, Halcyon, Tranxene, Valium, Mogadons, very powerful mind-numbing drugs. And I guess I've taken 35,000 drugs over 17, 18 years, hell of a lot of drugs, very powerful mind-numbing drugs.
Stephen Bailey was seriously injured in a road accident when he was 17. After several operations, he became depressed and started taking tranquilizers.
I was going to Benchworth one night, near Evesham, one night, and I was going through a very steep hill. And I put my foot down rather quickly. I don't know why I did it. Turned this corner and turned it over in the field, smashed it up. And I felt very blasé. The only word I can use is blasé. Very drugged up.
Since then, he's been involved in at least 4 other road accidents.
I'd be sort of driving home one night from Bournemouth, suddenly I'd be off the wheel and everything and just gone.
What happened?
Back of a car, 40 miles an hour. And the car was full of kids as well, and children.
I believe you're in the REC, your boyfriend was saying you should be AA, or your boyfriend was saying you should have a membership card. If you can find that for me, I'll fill them out when we get to
An accident on the M62 near Manchester, one of the busiest motorways in Britain. Last year, nearly 4,000 people were killed on our roads. 650 died as a result of drinking and driving. The police automatically test for alcohol after a major accident. It's easy to detect.
Their breath may smell of intoxicants, they may be unsteady on the feet, their eyes may be glazed. So there are a number of factors which would indicate to us whether that person had been drinking or not.
Have you ever tested a driver for drugs?
I personally have not had any cause to do that, no.
Yet you must have tested hundreds for drink.
I'm sure I have over many years, yes. No, don't start it. Just put the ignition on. Come on. That's it. Right, he's going to tow you.
85,000 people lost their licences in Britain last year alone because of drink driving offences. but the police seldom test for prescribed drugs.
In 32 years of traffic policing, it's never been mentioned. Perhaps as an afterthought by some people occasionally, but the great bulk of research done into causes of accidents, unexplained accidents, has always been in connection with people falling asleep or being drowsy at the wheel. And sleeplessness has been written off as the main cause.
For the first time, we reveal powerful new evidence of the link between accidents and medicines. It comes from blood tests from 300 seriously injured patients.
When we looked at them, we found that just over 16% of the total sample had a prescribed sedative drug in their blood. And just under that, about 14%, had alcohol over 80 milligram percent. But what it did mean was that you were more likely to have a prescribed sedative than alcohol.
Does this have an implication for the numbers of people having fatal road accidents?
If we're to take the figures in absolute terms, our work would suggest that maybe 600 road traffic accident fatalities could be laid at the door of sedative, psychoactive drugs.
At St Thomas's Hospital in London, Dr. Tony Hale has conducted his own research into the effects of sedative medicines on driving. He believes that the numbers of accidents could be even higher.
I think that there are between 500 and 1,000 fatal road traffic accidents a year attributable directly to the effects of one particular group of antidepressants. And one could probably double that if one includes all CNS active drugs. But if we try and partial out the effects for the tricyclic antidepressants, we think that 720 people a year suffer a fatal road traffic accident as a result of taking the drug and then continuing to drive a car nevertheless.
If all the general practitioners in England are doing their job, they will be saying to patients, I'm giving you a drug that is quite likely to interfere with your ability to drive a car. And in the case of some of these old tricyclic antidepressants, it can increase your risk of accident 6 times.
The research of Professor Hindmarch and Dr. Hale has revealed for the first time the scale of deaths in Britain as a result of sedative medicines. Scores of reports have been published around the world warning of these dangers, but were largely ignored. As early as 1972, the World Health Organization reported that all drugs which act on the nervous system may be dangerous. They make you tired and unable to concentrate. They reduce your reaction speed, and your movements are less precise. In 1979, an Oxford University report warned that drivers taking minor tranquilisers are at increased risk of having a road accident, and the results of our small study suggest that the risk may be substantial. World in Action has also discovered that airline companies drew up secret guidelines more than 20 years ago. Pilots are forbidden from flying if they've taken sedative medicines.
Now, if a pilot is found to disobey this, he loses his license. And I see no difference in between a pilot, the driver of a coach full of school children, a taxi driver, a train driver. And what we're asking for is not an enormous legal response. It's just simply the identification of the drugs which are bad.
Despite all the evidence, the government only introduced warning labels onto medicines in 1987. But critics say they're too vague and too small.
We've done a survey which shows that 70% of the patients who normally would drive at some time or another ignore the instructions not to drive, either because they say they've never been told or they haven't actually seen the warning on the packet.
I was never told about the effect it would have on coordination and concentration. I didn't realise that I wouldn't be able to drive on them.
There were no warnings or indications of the dangers emanating from these drugs.
I was never warned as regards anything.
The consumer, the end user in Britain, is being pushed further and further down the line. Drugs are very complex things nowadays, and we lead complex, complicated lives. We therefore need to know when we're driving if we're going to be dizzy, and we need to know when we're taking drugs over a long term whether there's going to be a cumulative effect. It is so important to have that information, even if our doctors are busy.
In Holland, things are very different. Clear warnings have been in place since 1973. Next year, an even tougher law comes into force.
We get a new law in January 1995 that we oblige to tell all the patients anywhere about everything, about diagnosis and therapy, what's the problem, what's the matter, what can be dangerous for the patient. So you have to tell them. And if you don't do it, you are not, let me be very careful, you're not a good doctor. I mean that. You have to inform the patients.
Every drug in Holland with sedative properties carries a clear warning label on it. A yellow label means activities which involve concentration may be seriously impaired. A red label means people are totally forbidden from carrying out any potentially dangerous activities.
If a patient is working in a construction building very high above the air, then I write down, put on the red label. If you're using the red labeling, you can be punished and go to court, to prison for that. You're not allowed to drive cars.
In Britain, the police rarely test for drugs. In Holland, it's a matter of routine. We spent a day with Toon Roevers, a brigadier in the Breda police.
We need an indication about his driving style, or we get straight or a little bit just like waves. That's most of the time the reason that we stop someone to check on drugs or alcohol.
In Holland, we never stop on the hard shoulder of a
well,
motorway.
My apologies.
Always stop on a safe place, a parking place,
yes,
or
my
gas station.
apologies.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. Really sorry.
Did you use medicine or drugs or alcohol?
Today?
Yes.
No.
No. Can I test? I can take a test of you. We try to find out what's the reason. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're depressed. Difficulties at home. Maybe the work. Maybe they use some medicine. That's what we ask.
Anyone suspected of taking red label drugs and driving is taken to the police station and blood tested. If they're found guilty, they face heavy fines or a prison sentence. In the Dutch hospitals too, doctors are at the forefront of a revolution in the treatment of depressed patients. They're phasing out the older antidepressants in favour of new, more expensive ones, which have far fewer side effects.
I think it's unbelievable that we now in the 95 almost, we're still using drugs from 1950. I think it's unbelievable, because we have all kinds of new developments, and if we would do the same things in other areas of medicine, we will still be in the stone age of medicine.
Any painkillers at all?
These new antidepressants are available in Britain, but they're not widely prescribed because of their high cost. It could add an extra £300 million to the NHS drugs bill.
A government statistic showed that the average cost of a road traffic fatality, a road traffic accident that was fatal, was £750,000. Now, it doesn't mean that you've got to save many of those road traffic accident fatalities to make a considerable economic saving. So it is a very spurious and cynical argument to say that these modern drugs cost an enormous amount of money.
If one looks at time taken off work, the quality of work that's done by people who go back to work, how long people are on sickness benefit, on invalidity benefit, taking those sort of factors into account, the costs come much more clearly into line.
If you want to get people better, you've got to use the best possible medicine. Now, the government have gone so far to say that you can actually put a cost on a death. Now, I think human life is a little bit more precious than that, particularly when it can be avoided. You don't have to have these deaths.